Welcome to the October 12th meeting of the Planning Board. I'll start out by taking a roll call of the members that are present. Linda.
Here.
Andrew.
Here.
And Kristen.
Present.
Thank you. And we have a quorum, but Kate Hanley will be arriving shortly. The first item. Yep.
Kate McEnany. Kate McEnany.
What did I just say?
Kate Hanley.
Oh, Kate McEnany. Sorry about that. The first item tonight is the continuation of the hearing for, let me get this all correct. In accordance with the provisions of MGL Chapter 41, Section 81-T in the Town of Concord subdivision rules to review the definitive subdivision plan application of Quarry North Road LLC to create a subdivision at 48 Fitchburg Turnpike, 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike. We've received a letter from the applicant's attorney requesting a lengthy extension after several prior extensions to April 5th, a continuance to April 5th, 2022, a time extension to April 29th, 2022. They have been coordinating with town staff on that. So if I may, I'll go ahead and move that the board continue the application of Quarry Road North LLC for a definitive subdivision at 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike, parcel 3419 to 7:30 p.m. on April 5th, 2022, and accept the grant of a time extension request to April 29th, 2022 to file the board's decision with the town clerk. May I get a second for that?
A second. Oh, everybody seconds.
Thank you, Kristen. You've got it. And with that, I will take a vote. I am a yes. Linda Miller.
Yes.
Andrew Boardman.
Yes.
Kristen Ferguson.
Yes.
And Nathan Bosdet. Welcome.
Yes.
All right. So that's unanimous. So extended until April 5th, 2022. And with that, we will not close the public hearing, but
Continue.
Continue the public hearing. Thank you. The next item, which I think we can get to without Kate, is the A&R plan number 21-5 and 26 and for 26 and 46 Revolutionary Road. So Elizabeth, I'll hand the screen to you.
Yep. I don't know. Nathan, can I share a screen between two different things? Do you guys see the agenda memo or just the plan?
We only see one at a time.
Oh.
So we were looking at the plan just a minute ago.
And do you see the agenda memo now or the plan?
Yeah. Agenda memo.
Oh, okay. So the property is Revolutionary Road. This is Ridge Road, Lexington Road, up here at the corner. The property owners own both lots, and to accommodate the construction of a pool and the required setbacks for the pool, they are just, the current property line goes straight down the middle. They're just adjusting it this direction to provide the setbacks for the pool.
And so just moving the property line, and you confirmed that both lots following the conveyance would meet the minimum lot requirements to be conforming in that district.
Correct.
All right. And they're not changing the frontage in any way.
No.
I have a question. I know these are fairly perfunctory because, the two conditions have been checked off, but I live on that street. So can I abstain or should I abstain? Does it matter for something like this?
It does not matter for something like this. You have no financial interest in their lot line adjustment, and I don't see any.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah, I don't see any issue.
All right. Well, then I'll make a motion to the planning board should endorse the plan by Andrisic Land Surveying titled Plan of Land Concord, Massachusetts, 26 and 46 Revolutionary Road for Hans Martin Seidel and Bonnie Louise Bertolet, dated September 21, 2021, as approval not required because the plan is not a subdivision, because it shows a proposed conveyance which changes the size and shape of the lots in such a manner that frontage is not affected, and authorize myself, the chair, the clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan. And do you need anybody else to be able to endorse it, Elizabeth? We're good there? Okay,
We're good.
I second that.
thank you, Nathan. With that, Linda Miller, how do you
I
vote?
vote yes.
Anthony Boardman,
It's Andrew and yes.
what did I just? I'm so sorry, Andrew.
No, no worries.
I have no idea why I am throwing out random names tonight. Kristen Ferguson
Yes.
and Nathan Bosdet,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay. At least I didn't call you Adrian again, Andrew, because that's how your name came up on the Zoom. Okay, the next item is the Thoreau Business District Draft Design Guidelines and Zoning Discussion, followed by the FAR. I'd like to wait till Kate can join us because she's been such a big part of those discussions, and should be joining us within about the next 5 to 10 minutes. So I think if we can move to consideration of the draft meeting minutes of 9/14/21 and 9/28/21. I know that the ones from, I think it was for the 28th came out rather last minute, but hopefully people had a chance to review them. I'll start with the 9/14/21 minutes. Did anybody have any edits or comments to those? Okay, great. So can I get a motion to approve those minutes? We'll just do them one at a time.
I'll move to approve those minutes.
Okay, as drafted, I'd second that. Linda Miller,
Yes.
Andrew Boardman,
Yes.
Kristen Ferguson,
Yes.
Nathan Bosdet,
Yes.
and I am a yes. All right, now on to the 9/28/21 minutes. Any comments or edits to those minutes? Great, we are very lucky to have Nancy do those for us. So with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the minutes of September 28th, 21 as drafted and presented to the board. If I can get a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Nathan. You keep it up, Elizabeth. You good?
I am.
Okay, now I start with Linda
I know
Miller.
I'm kind of rusty with this whole minute taking thing, so
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Andrew,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So Elizabeth, that's 2 unanimous votes to approve the minutes as drafted. Okay, well, it's 7:10. The other things are planning board liaison updates and general public comment. So I guess at this point, we'll go ahead and turn to the Thoreau Depot Business District Draft Design Guidelines and Zoning Discussion. So for tonight's meeting, we did receive a number of documents that were new. We've received first, I note a letter and from, I just want to note the name.
John Ellis.
John Ellis, thank you very much. And we also received a shadow study for what was allowable under existing zoning and the proposed zoning. We've got I believe, somewhat updated the actual zoning bylaw text, and we have the design guidelines. Is there anything else? That's it. Elizabeth, do you want to start by grounding us with the status of the zoning bylaw, the proposed zoning bylaw, and well, I guess any of those pieces?
Okay. And there's Kate.
Great.
7:10. Okay,
Elizabeth,
so-
did you put the FAQ together all by yourself?
No, MAPC did the initial draft.
Okay.
And then Marcia and I went over it.
Oh, thank you. That's great. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no worries. I think what I'd probably like to start with is MAPC's shadow study. And give me 2 seconds and there we go.
Hi, guys. I'm here. Sorry to be late.
Thanks for joining, Kate.
weird.
We're just starting on the Thoreau Business District. We sort of held off until you joined us.
Chris at MAPC went through and got help from some very technically savvy people in MAPC to look at the different heights at 35 and 38 feet as they relate to the existing zoning bylaw and what is proposed for the Thoreau Depot, with the inclusion of the design guidelines, which requires, the different setbacks and modifications of the roof lines. And so, I won't go through the summary or, the methodology that they, went through. But what I did ask him to do was to basically, take both areas, this area where Crosby's Market is, where if a new taller building went, would likely have the greatest impact on the residential area that abuts the property down Sudbury Road. There would be less of an impact on this side because of this is the commuter rail, which sits up, already sits up fairly high, and these homes sit down much lower than the commuter rail. And then over here on Thoreau Street, this is Dunkin' Donuts, Karma restaurant, and then the parking lot in the back. And then I also asked him to take a look at these at different times of the day, but the two different seasons, summer and winter. So he did go through and also took in consideration the setbacks and how, if they were redeveloped, you have a building setback and where the sidewalk was in compared to where the street and the sidewalk in both examples. And
I have a quick question though to
Yeah.
frame this. So this was helpful, but I'm assuming that this was requested because many people were concerned about the height, the height change.
correct.
And then did you have indication about what people's concerns were about the shadows? Was it that private residents were concerned that the shadows were gonna, that they were gonna be blocked by these tall buildings?
Yes, private residents, and then also just, the impact on, the roadway and,
Okay.
if it, feels like you're starting to get, closed in.
Okay,
You can walk, Boston is an extreme example, but, you can go down some of the streets in Boston, it just, so just making sure it didn't have that type of more urban feel where it's a little bit more enclosed. So,
okay.
so
May I ask
Go ahead.
one question, Elizabeth? So are these heights based upon 35 or specifically, I guess, not for the Sudbury Road example, I guess that could be 38. But for the Thoreau Street example, would that be 35 because of its proximity to residential?
Well, isn't that what the person was saying who wrote in? That we have just one area?
But no, well, the difference is that there's a principal street and a secondary street concept
In the bylaw.
in the proposed bylaw, which effectively applies slightly different zoning rules to Thoreau Street for, well, like the intersection of Thoreau and Sudbury is interesting, and we'll get to that. But slightly different rules along Sudbury. And then there's a further requirement that to do 4 stories, you need to be within a greater than, what is it, 100 feet?
Either 100 or 125 feet, I can't remember.
Okay, so effectively, it seems to eliminate the 4-story on Thoreau, effectively.
So the study was, so hypothetical development under existing zoning is a 35-foot flat roofed building.
Right.
And then hypothetical development under proposed zoning is a 38-foot pitched roof.
Okay. Okay, so it is 38 feet. Okay.
Yes. So I mean, it's,
And the
They're-
gist of it
they're-
is the cutting the corner off by making it pitched moves that shadow line in, assuming like a 45-degree angle.
correct. So this is center line of the street, the shadow goes across. This way, pitched roof, it doesn't. And then it's just similar all the way, similar all the way down. So this building right here, the proposed zoning requires that modulation
Mhm.
in the front facade in some manner. And then this is just the flat roof and flat front.
Okay.
So I just thought it would be good to go through this, as the board moves on to proposed zoning and the discussions there. And how you think you might want to proceed with that.
And is
So
this
it-
assuming, help me connect, with respect to setbacks from the street for both the principal and secondary street. So I believe secondary is 0 feet right from the sidewalk, and that's the same as it is today. Is that right?
Correct.
And then for the principals for Sudbury Road, you need a 10-foot setback, and it looks like, do you need a 10-foot setback today?
So the setback requirements from a primary street, the minimum is 12 feet, the maximum is 20 feet.
That's today?
Secondary, no, this is the
That's
proposed.
proposed. Okay, so 12 and 20, and secondary is 0 to 10, right?
Zero is minimum, 12 feet is maximum.
What's allowed today on Sudbury? I'm wondering. What was for the minimum setback?
Oh, I should have brought my glasses down.
Well, this is in the, I can,
So in the Thoreau Depot Business District, there is the only setback requirements are side and rear.
okay. So this drawing is actually showing it, the one you have up on the screen is showing what appears to be construction with a 12-foot setback.
So you have the setbacks, but then you also get into the design guidelines where it's, the pedestrian
Yeah.
walkway or other, public spaces or landscape areas. So I
Right.
think what he proposed was hypothetical setbacks 10 for a sidewalk, and then 15 from there.
Okay. So the sidewalks there today, which is 10, 15 back from that. But when you go down to the Sudbury Road example, and this is a really minor point, I'll move off of it quickly. It appears that he's showing that also under the existing zoning is having a 15-foot setback from the sidewalk under the existing zoning diagram there, which is not required. So if the concern is around canyonization or shadows with respect to Sudbury Road, it could actually look a lot worse than the existing zoning hypothetical example provided, I think, right? Right. Yeah, okay.
Yep. So I will follow up with Chris and get that clarified and make sure these are accurate representations.
The takeaway, though, I think we can take from the shadow is that this shadow study is that with respect to shadows, not necessarily building mass or things, but with respect to shadows and midday in April and midday in the winter, that the proposed the zoning would reduce the shadows from what is buildable under the existing zoning laws.
Correct.
Okay. Well,
Or,
I think-
or if these setbacks are too great, it would at least, because of the, the vertical and horizontal modulation of the building frontage, would at a minimum cause a break in the shadows.
Right.
And to clarify for our listening audience, it's not what we're comparing is what could be there, not the buildings that are actually there right now, but what
Right.
could be built with our current zoning should no changes occur.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Should we go to the facts? Has everybody had a chance to, on the board, had a chance to digest the zoning? I think, and the proposed bylaws is circulated and the design guidelines. I hope so. Okay. Elizabeth, in the zoning bylaw, there were some highlighted sections, yes or no, in terms of allowed uses and so forth. Would it make sense to go to that now and go through and sort of make some final determinations?
Yes.
Okay.
So give me 2 seconds. Okay. So can everybody see that, or do I need to zoom in a little or anything?
No, that's, well, you can see
Good.
it. Yes.
So as for the uses, the initial thought is, creating a new column for the Thoreau Depot Business District. All the current, wherever it was, yes to yes, yes to yes, those are all the same as it currently is. And then it's the ones where I have the highlight would be a point of discussion.
Okay.
So, private recreation, and I can read the definitions. A planned residential development, currently they're allowed, keep it special permit or, yes or no. So those are just the ones where,
Okay.
where there could be a change and, so all of these, is that something the board wants to consider? Repair shop or the existing businesses that are there. So like the gas station, those would remain, those would be, should it become a no and it's currently a yes, they, they can remain, they're legal, they would just become legal non-conforming, and it doesn't inhibit their ability to continue to operate in any manner. So that's,
Or change ownership, right?
or change in ownership that would not also be affected.
So let's just
those
start at the top there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So first, private recreation. What is that? That's not like a health club, is it?
I have the definition too. Where did it go? It's country club, riding academy, playground and tennis, fishing, boating, skating, swimming, fitness clubs, and similar facility for organized athletic activities.
Okay, I could
by the-
totally see a gym going in there.
Yeah.
Maybe not a riding academy, but a gym. So I would, I mean, I think that I don't see a reason to treat it differently from the other commercial districts.
I agree.
Does anybody disagree? My proposal is to keep it a yes as it currently is. Okay. Hearing no objection. Elizabeth, let's move on to the next one, which is a planned residential development. Now, am I having a brain freeze? But any PRD would be effectively a special permit or not, or we'd be saying, no, you can't get a special permit here.
Correct.
Okay. 4 years on the
Yep.
committee, I feel like I'm starting to figure it out. So the question in here is, do we think that the PRD process would be appropriate in this area if it was rezoned? It's allowed today by special permit. I guess, have we seen PRDs? Is there an example of a PRD that is a multifamily or mixed use development?
No, so there is no PRD that's a mixed use development. The only consideration I could see would be something similar to, like the Concord Housing Authority or Habitat or for Humanity, because they can, if they, find a house and like Habitat and want to turn it into a duplex,
Right.
the only requirements is height and access off a public way. All other requirements are waived. So, if I try and think up and down the, Thoreau Depot district, I can't really think of, a property where that might even work. But would it be awful if they couldn't do it just because it got changed to a no? So I don't see an issue with keeping it as a special permit.
Just thinking as to having to explain why we would change one thing in the case of the Thoreau Business District compared to what is allowed today, not having a good reason, I would say keep it as allowable under special permit, because of course the planning board would have an opportunity to review that. So to me, this seems it should be kept as special permit. Does anybody else have thoughts on it?
I agree. I like the argument that, without having a good cause or reason to change it from the other districts, we should leave it.
Okay. All right. So hearing no counter point to that, I would say let's keep that as a special permit. Hospital and nursing home. So this is allowed today. This is interesting because, well, there's no like super, like daycares and churches, or you can't build these by right, can you?
A daycare and a church?
No, hospitals and nursing homes.
Oh, no, they're not a protected status. No.
Okay. It's interesting to me. I'm thinking we have a district in town where we have the hospitals and nursing home facilities. They tend to require not so much a lot of parking, but they do tend to have, nursing homes, a lot of, for example, emergency service vehicles going to the site and things like that. And they don't really, well, I don't know whether a nursing home, as distinct from, say, assisted living, would benefit from being in a walking district. So I could go either way on this one.
I think this one more closely aligns with West Concord Village. So, and that's a no. So I would move it to be a no.
Okay.
I
Linda.
agree.
I was just going to say, in terms of the walkability, it may not be for the residents, but it might be for employees.
Well, that's an excellent point.
So,
That's a really good point. Kristen, you were agreeing in the other direction.
Yeah, but that is a good point that Linda makes.
My only point is, to create that mixed use, like vibrant village, you're not gonna have, a nursing home that's
Right.
near or, attached to an active, retail, business, operation.
On the other hand, it's pretty much a model that for having shopped for these things, that you buy a condominium, right? And you live there, and that then turns into assisted living. And as your requirements for nursing care increase, because you bought in and made that investment, you get to move into the nursing facility. And if you haven't bought in up front, you don't get into the nursing facility. So it's a continuum of care model. And I could see something where you have a multifamily development with some flats in it that people move into when they want to downsize. And that's when they're buying into their retirement community. And that's one of the biggest things that's been identified as a need in the long range plan. I could see that happening. But maybe that's a little bit of a special case, which suggests a special permit. Can the special permit be the compromise on this one?
Sure.
What do you think, Linda? So you raised the point.
I raised a point. I don't know that I don't know that I would see that that's the optimal use of this land, but
Mhm.
I don't know that our job is to find that optimal use. So I could see that it's a reasonable use. So I would probably put special permit just so that there is review of it.
And
I like that.
one question I had below about that example is, below that is
Oh.
assisted living.
You're
So if
right.
Assisted living isn't allowed.
Yeah, that's-
Does
Good
your
point.
proposed model make sense, or is it more likely that this is a more extreme version of sort of like an actual rehab facility, where there's less need to be so close, other than obviously for staffing purposes?
Another great point, Andrew. But I'm confused, Elizabeth, because of course there is assisted living in the West Concord today.
So assisted living is, currently it is only permitted in the limited business district in West Concord, which is only 68 Commonwealth Ave, which is Concord Park Assisted Living Facility.
Okay. All right. So
So-
that's,
So I think a no probably fits more of what is the current standard then.
yeah.
So, but I think to Linda's point, I think a no for hospital nursing home would be fine. And, assisted living, special permit, that could be an option if
Yeah.
somebody, if it were, part of, some type of mixed use development. What I would hate to see is just a standalone assisted living facility. And
Right.
so you kind of have to think of, I know it's not we're not, the board's not required to think, what's the optimal use, but a standalone assisted living facility, would not make a vibrant village.
Right.
Yes, the employees would benefit from it, but it would not add to a vibrant, village with people living, walking, working, shopping.
But I do think you get into sort of a little bit of a fuzzy area, right? Between independent living, assisted living and the like. And I would like to, I could imagine, I mean, my mother is an independent living, but she has a nurse 24 hours a day. So I would say having assisted living as a special permit could allow for that kind of continuum potentially, but with consideration by the board. I mean, I get your point, Elizabeth. What we're looking for is something slightly different. But what I could see is what enables what the marketability of flats for seniors is the ability for them to, there to be an adjunct to the facility that would care for them if they had memory care issues or something like that, down the road. So, all right, I kind of turned around and around on this. I kind of think 435 would be a no, and 436 could be special permit.
Okay. Linda?
I was just gonna say, could you put assisted living and continuing care residences, or you can't redefine that?
No, you can't redefine it, but
Okay.
I can read the definition unless Kristen gets to it before me.
I have it. It's just long.
It is long.
No,
I don't know if you want to show it on your screen.
Oh, I can.
The
well,
new bylaw looks lovely, by the way.
Thank you.
It's very modern.
Oh, it is very long.
okay.
So, but to your point,
It's a structure or structures used to provide assistance with the activities of daily living in a residential setting for people who require such services. Assistance with activities of daily living means the provision of physical support, aid, or assistance with bathing, dressing, grooming, ambulating, eating, or other similar tasks. An assisted living residence may have central dining facilities, lounges, meeting rooms, laundry rooms, greenhouses, exercise rooms, and rec areas, libraries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's eligible for certification as an assisted living residence by the Office of Elder Affairs.
so to your point, Linda, I think there's a difference. I think if you had independent living with assistance, then you have an assisted living facility, and those are separate from when you get to from
Nursing
assisted living, you go to nursing, nursing home or skilled nursing facility. I think nursing home, skilled nursing facility are 435, and an assisted living facility would be the same, whether it's independent living with services or assisted living. I think they would be the same.
Yep.
Under that definition.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Let's, I think, are we a no on the nursing facility here and the hospital? Yeah, okay. And then in terms of assisted living, either keep it the same, or I would say to go so far as special permit, but not a yes. I'll just go around the room. Linda, what would you prefer to see there between those two?
Well, it seems to me in West Concord, I don't know how that happened, but I would agree that it's well, very valuable to the community. It probably doesn't reach our definition of vibrant, walkable areas. I probably would put special permit, I think.
Okay. Andrew?
My inclination would be a no.
Okay.
Just keep it consistent with the rest of the town, that if the goal is to use zoning to create something better, and to focus it a little bit, where you're granting something that's not otherwise permitted in other business districts, that's not necessarily going to make it more vibrant, more walkable, all those things, it kind of is self-defeating.
Okay. Okay. Kate?
My vote would be a no, because the type of housing that we are going for vis-a-vis the long range plan is I think, distinct from what's provided in a independent living facility or a nursing home.
Okay,
In that we're going for diverse housing and apartment housing and not, it's a whole different ball of wax for these uses. So my vote's no.
okay. Kristen,
I also vote no. And I'm wondering, because we have a lot of different parts that we're going through, and I see a couple of hands up, when would it make sense to take public comment?
I think that because let's do it once we've gotten through this document. But that doesn't mean we won't revisit things. Just so that we can keep some momentum going. So that's 3-1. That kind of think, well, let's see, Nate, how do you go?
I would also have it as a no for
All right.
all the reasons. So Andrew had some of the exact points I was going to make. So yeah. that's a
Yeah,
no.
you kind of convinced me there, Andrew. So I think let's keep that as a no. So no change there. And now, so far we're keeping everything the same. Now here we have these uses. Medical center, auto service. So this is actually taking away things that people could do today. All right. So restricting uses. My only thought here is that one of the things we've heard a lot of concerns about is the expansion of parking and the traffic caused by the auto repair shop on the corner. I'm going and well, that's an existing use that would be a prior non-conforming use that would continue to be allowed, and there would be no impact by this. I would suspect that people don't want to see additional auto repair shops or auto service stations in this district. Certainly not vehicular dealerships, which are just so much parking. Boat sales is the same. The parking facility, I guess, is Elizabeth, the proposal would be to move that to a special permit. Just is that in part so that the design of it would go through the review of the planning board to make sure that it conformed with the design guidelines, because there were specific guidelines around what parking should look like?
So a parking facility is defined as a commercial parking lot or parking garage. So
Commercial parking lot, is that paid parking? Is that what that means?
yes,
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
or a parking garage. So, by special permit, who knows how,
Right.
a lot could get developed there, and somebody, is somebody else pointed out as far as, commuter parking, somebody may want to propose, underground parking, and part of it could be, and surface parking could be, a parking facility. I mean,
Mhm.
so
But that would be the
special-
kind of thing that the board would want to look at.
So special permit just kind of, leaves the conversation on the table.
Yeah. Before we go consider parking facility, does anybody think that we should not further restrict things for 5.12 inclusive through 16?
Well, I'll make an interesting argument just because you made the comment about the vehicular dealerships. What about for things that, I mean, you go to a Tesla dealership or some of the other newer ones that are coming up, they don't really have that model anymore. There's no cars on site. So, I mean, there's no real way to, I mean, I guess you could make it a special permit and say if you're doing that model, or even if it's a special permit, you say only if it's EVs. I don't know. I'm just trying to think about future use, not just how it currently is done, but this can always be changed, I guess.
I see. That's a good point, that it's turning more into a showroom model than a parking storage place. There's vehicular, I'm curious, Elizabeth, the definition of vehicular dealerships. I think of a car lot, but I'm wondering, could that also be applied to, for example, an electric scooter dealer or something like that?
Sales room and related dealership facilities for automobiles, boats, motorcycles, trucks, off-road vehicles, or farm implements.
Okay. Okay,
So,
so it's not gonna be,
I guess
an-
we can't have that John Deere dealership, I guess.
well, all right. I mean, I don't feel particularly strongly one way or the other than, my gut reaction was that these things are not conducive to a vibrant village center, but I am also sensitive to effectively taking away existing property rights here by saying, you can that lot you have, you can no longer do these things here and making it more restrictive. Anybody?
So are you proposing kind of leaving it as is and not taking that, so
No,
not changing the special permit to a no?
No, I think I would. I think that I think that Nathan makes a good point about what might a vehicular dealership look like in the future. It may be quite different. So that one I might keep as a special permit. The others, I'm in agreement that they should be as they are highlighted. All no's except for the special permit for a parking facility. That's just my view. I'm just
But
one.
you're saying and vehicular dealership, change that from a no to special permit?
Yes.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be eliciting strong reactions one way or the other. Would people be okay with that proposal, which is essentially Nathan's? I see a nod from Linda.
Sorry, what, we're changing
Wait a
it from what
second,
to
wait a
what?
second.
We're changing what to what? I mean,
Okay,
what, sorry, what's it?
so we would change 4, 5, 15 to a special permit.
And right now it's no.
Right now it's a yes.
Oh, I see.
So the middle column here, all those yeses are the existing zoning for
Oh,
Thoreau Business
okay,
District.
got it.
So we are saying whereas today you could build a auto service station where, the little
Yeah.
market is, we
I-
are saying, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, no, I'm on board with the compromise of the special permit. I think that's good.
Okay. Does anybody else
Okay.
want any change to these columns in the 4, 5s?
Boat sales.
I would see the merit of putting them all as special permits as opposed to
Yeah.
no, because it still provides the flexibility. I don't know if that creates an administrative headache or to have all these special permits. I don't know if it,
There's not going to be,
But-
there's not going to be a lot of special permits.
aren't
But
necessarily
yeah,
what
sorry,
what
Andrew.
my concern about putting it as no is there right now we have people who are saying, well, we don't need a gas station there, we need something better. And if you put it as a no, does it present an odd optical thing that we have existing businesses which are now non-conforming and creates like I don't know. It's just I see special permit as we're not really restricting or taking away anything. It's just it's making it more organized in that sense. I don't know though.
I agree with Andrew. I don't think we should do for all the rest of these no's, let's make those special permits. Because for each one of these, I just agree with what Andrew said. Let's do special permits.
But I think that this is also our time to kind of shape what we want the district to look like and encourage certain development over other development. So that's what I want to make sure we don't just, because if it is a special permit, it could get through.
Yeah, I agree. That's the same mindset I have. I think it's about sort of having the idea of what you want that space to look like in the future. And so that means excluding some things potentially.
And it's important to remember the standard of review of a special permit versus, for example, a variance, right? In my mind, as long as the applicant's meeting certain requirements that we would need to be developed for each of these special permits, then it's granting a special permit is more likely than not, right? versus a variance, which is much less likely than not. So if we change these all to special permits, presumably then we would need to come up with criteria for each. And then somebody could come along and meet those criteria and receive their permit.
Is that true that we would need to do criteria for each, or is the special permit criteria broad enough it covers different uses?
No, the special permit criteria does not. I mean, the special permit criteria is, just those specific items. It's not, well, it's not specific to a particular use, no.
So
So, yeah, if you wanted to, yes, you can have a auto service station, but you want to have limitations on that or specific parameters or criteria, you would have to develop that specifically in the new Thoreau Depot Business District. They don't exist currently.
But do the existing criteria, are they broad enough to encompass something like that?
So the existing criteria for a special permit deals with the impacts on economic or community need, traffic flow and safety concerns, including parking and loading, adequacy of utilities and other public services, impacts on neighborhood character, impacts on the natural environment, and fiscal impacts, including impacts on town services, the tax base, and employment.
So that sounds like it works.
Yeah, so the board's required to look at those specific criteria and make a determination that the proposed use will not outweigh its beneficial impact to the public interest, the town, and the neighborhood in view of the particular circumstances of the site and in relationship to the site.
Okay, so we've got an argument that we would not need to create criteria for how we would review, for example, a auto repair shop versus it would be looking at traffic and impact to the neighborhood and those general criteria that we can say we've weighed before for special permits. Let's go through this. I think we've got. I don't know if I want to go through each one in particular. We've got a proposal that they all be changed to special permit versus we've got all be changed from a yes to no with 2 exceptions for vehicular dealerships and parking facilities. Was there anybody that would want to see them all a no? Let's just see about that. Okay, so what we have then is what's shown on the screen versus all special permit. Let's just do a quick round the room. Linda, sorry, I'm going to keep calling on you first. I don't mean to pick on you, but Linda.
No, it's fine. I would go with what's on the screen.
Okay, Nathan.
I'm happy with what's on the screen. I will throw in one other thing. Why do we have veterinary and kennel as a no across the board for all of these? Because I can think of like Arlington Center, there's a veterinary clinic that's there that I used to use when I lived in that area. It was nice to have one you could walk to that was there. It wasn't huge or anything. I'm just wondering.
I would have thought that was a noise thing if it was like a boarding kennel.
Yeah.
Well, kennel, yeah, like a straight up kennel, I could see no. I was thinking, I don't know if that could be a special permit type thing where we define it as more toward the veterinary clinic side rather than, a stay play or a kennel for dogs, cats, etc.
So that would require probably a change in the definition of veterinary and kennel, right?
Well, no, if you made it a special permit, then, if somebody proposed a kennel, that, the criteria for a special permit, the impact on the neighborhood,
Okay.
noise. And so, I mean,
Right
I
now
could,
it's the same, right? Veterinary, kennel, and place for boarding and caring for animals. It's just one thing, right?
well, a veterinarian office, they would have to, if they have a kennel, which is boarding of dogs, it's different than a veterinarian office.
No,
And they would
but
have
for
to,
purposes of it was the same? I'm saying
Well,
the definition in the bylaw. But you're saying if it came in front of you in special permit, you could consider if you were primarily a veterinarian that was going to kennel sometimes versus a kennel.
Can I ask this? I think it's 2 points. I can see that it would be valuable to have a veterinarian in a village center. I am a little wary about allowing a use that's not allowed today in the context of this overall proposal. I could see tackling it separately where you bifurcate the definition of veterinarian kennel or something like that and making a use change. And for the same reason you're making it here, also applying it to, West Concord and others. I mean, it seems logical. There used to be a groomer in
That's
West
a good
Concord.
point. I agree with, that's a good point.
Okay, so then you like what's on the screen with respect to 12 through 17. Andrew, what's your thought?
Based on the discussion, I would support what's on the screen right now. The no is
Okay,
2 special permits.
okay, thank you. And Kristen?
Yes, I support what's on the screen.
Kate? Are you convinced?
I don't support what's on the screen. So I don't know why we're just discriminating against boats, but we are okay with cars. So if we're going special permit with cars, then I think boat sales should be in there. I think also that it's good. Storage yard, open air sales, no. Warehouse, no. R&D and light manufacturing, I would say yes. Not yes, special permit, sorry.
Okay, let's hold off on 4, 6 just for the time being, because we're going to get to those.
Oh, sorry, are we just talking about 4, 5 right now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, my only comment is about boats.
Okay, so you'd like to see boats as a special permit.
Or a car, or no for cars, as long as it's the same.
Okay,
I don't really have a feeling. I don't know why we would want car dealers. Like we're doing everything we can to get rid of cars. I don't know why, but just, I guess, so my vote would be to special permit for a boat dealership.
okay. I'm in favor of what's on the screen. So that is 5 and 1 person with suggestion that we treat boats as the same as special permits. Since that wasn't any part of the discussion, if anybody else is in favor of that, please raise your hand and I'll look for you on the screen. All right. I think we're good with what's on the screen for now.
So can
yes.
I bring in one other item of discussion? So in the West Concord Village, you have professional offices,
Yeah.
which are office of a doctor, lawyer, accountant, architect, engineer, real estate broker, or similar profession. And it's yes, but it's got the 3 little stars. That is 3 little stars, right? I cannot see that.
Looks like 3.
Yes.
It says, except no residential use, lodge or club, professional office,
Mhm.
or R&D and light manufacturing shall be permitted on the first floor in the West Concord Village District.
Mhm. Yeah.
My concern is, yes, a lodge or a club is, that's different than a private recreation. Like a gym. Lodge or club is like Muscataquit Club or Rod and Gun Club.
Yep.
And the Throw Depot already says you can't have, I believe it says you can't have residential use on the first floor. My concern is the professional office. On the first floor, and it's not so much, the doctor, lawyer, accountant, architect, or engineer. It is, definitely a concern with, again, the proliferation of real estate.
Yeah.
Real estate businesses. I'm not sure. Almost every single one of them is already in Concord Center. So I'm not sure whether that is something that the board has a concern about or not. I just wanted to, just highlight that's just kind of like one of the differences between, those 3.
Yeah, and I recall very clearly when I mean, I think we added real estate office to that definition of professional services, right? That was about 3 years ago. In response to that, the only issue, I guess, is, I mean, there are existing real estate offices in the Thoreau Business District. I can think of, I think, 2 at least. I mean,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we have in the Thoreau Business District a prohibition of formula businesses?
no.
So they wouldn't be under that. And should we have that?
That's definitely something the board can discuss. Before I would go, I'd have to go out and do an inventory of how many are there. So that you had at least some baseline.
And that wouldn't have to go in the new Thoreau Business District. That would go in the limitation of number of formula businesses, because right, and that's where it lists where we would do that.
Formula Business bylaw, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I
Just-
think we're probably 8 or 9, Elizabeth, just off the top of my head.
So it's let's definitely keep that on our radar, but it wouldn't have to go in this big change.
Well,
But
it would not be challenging to add.
Yeah. And we
So
have a pretty good
We're
one
adding
now.
something.
You would add it in this section here in what we're working on now?
No, that would be
No,
separate.
you'd add it in 3,
Yeah, in 3.2.
3.3 formula business.
Yeah,
I-
and I guess I'm just wondering about kind of convoluting the message, or I don't know. Anyway,
Right.
it's something certain, but it's something to think about. I think that's good.
I didn't mean to digress onto that subject, but I wanted to make sure that formula businesses wouldn't affect, the professional offices, like more real estate agents coming into town, because we're kind of at the limit. But I agree with you about real estate agents. I mean,
So let me, just because that's introducing something new, and it's it's already 8 o'clock and you haven't even gotten off page 2. I'll look into the formula business. I'll do an existing count, and then draft something up for the board to consider at your next meeting.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I think that would be helpful. So let's just revisit this point on whether we think it makes sense to place this kind of restriction on professional offices on the first floor of these businesses. I think people are picturing vibrant shop fronts, restaurants facing out onto the street, and the concern is where it's becoming just a professional office that's maybe using the windows as advertisement. How do people feel? Do we want to do this stepwise and do this, and then can come back, and it could be a future board that comes back and puts a limitation like they have in West Concord? Or does it make sense to do that now because we're seeing what's happened in Concord Center?
I think it makes sense to do it now.
Okay, that's 1-4.
1-4.
All right, Andrew, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, if you're already opening up that can and it's something that's on the table, it seems like an easy thing to carry with, as opposed to trying to reopen it later. Once leases start getting signed or whatever, or
Yeah.
if somebody puts a development proposal forward and it looks like you're trying to restrict them as they're redeveloping. Better to
Right.
write those now.
Okay, anybody else?
I have a question. Would we then want to include financial and business offices not on the first floor?
Well, for whatever reason that wasn't identified as a issue, and maybe it's because financial and business offices don't want to pay for the first floor space on the street. I don't recall that part of the discussion, Linda. Or maybe it's just that lawyers and realtors, speaking as a lawyer, have a particularly bad reputation. I don't know. Elizabeth, do you recall why we didn't put the same restriction for those?
So a financial or business office is a bank, loan agency, or business office. So professional office loops the doctors, lawyers, accountants, architects, engineers, real estate brokers, and similar professions. So as just to move this along, as the board's talking about this and trying to figure out whether to restrict, no, yes, special permit, that brings me back more and more to, I think, having a formula business limitation would allow that flexibility, but not have complete influx. And it would just be trying to find that right balance in the number of formula businesses that could be allowed.
So you're saying you accomplish the same thing of maintaining first floor vibrancy through a formula business restriction rather than having a one on professional offices.
I think so.
Mhm.
Because if I create the list, you can say, okay, there's 2 banks, 2 real estate offices, 2
Coffee shops.
Well, that's a copy shop is not that would be a retail business.
Sorry, I was going with formula businesses.
Oh,
I thought you were
Which-
counting off the formulas. I'm sorry.
oh, no, that's okay. So I mean, there already might be a good mix. Let's say it's 10 and okay, so you can bump it up to 12 or something. So I think that discussion would be helpful next time.
Okay. Let's get that information on the number and we can come back to this, keeping in mind that it could also be seen as a restriction. 4.6, I've already heard Kate thinks we should allow for light manufacturing and R&D. Does anybody else have any input they want to throw out on these 4.6 restrictions? Again, these are all flipped from a yes to a no as proposed.
So I'd really like to hear Kate's reasoning on R&D and light manufacturing, because the definition is research and development or light manufacturing, including general offices with research, testing, training, light manufacturing, or warehouse facilities for computers, telecommunications, photographic instrumentation, biomedical, or similar high-tech or light manufacturing uses. In all cases, light manufacturing shall be limited to fabrication, assembly, processing, and packaging, employing only electric or other substantially noiseless or inoffensive power, and free from neighborhood disturbing agents such as dust, fume, odors, emission, smoke, vapor, light, vibration, or noise. In the business district, no more than 5 full-time workers or their equivalent shall be employed in light manufacturing on the premise. So typically they don't have a lot of employees. They take up a lot of space and have far more, a different type of traffic pattern.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Does anybody else have any concerns about changing these from yes to no for storage yard, open air sales, R&D, light manufacturing, packaging, processing, testing? Okay, then let's stay with that. Now we get into the, yes.
This next section it's fairly
Right.
simple. It's
redirects.
just referencing the new sections. So the first point of discussion, MAPC talked about, excuse me. Oh, I'm going to start coughing again. MAPC talked about just changing the parking requirement for combined business residents.
Okay. So, when that's combined business residents in one building or on one lot?
No, this is just any combined business residence.
Throughout town, not just the Row Business District.
So that would be the question. You know, is this something just for the Throw Depot business? Sorry,
Or is it townwide?
or townwide. So you
Mhm.
think about some of the other combined business residences. So 13B Com Ave was the most recent. And what this would do would, the parking for the retail section would stay the same. And it's the changing the, you know, the combined business residence side of it to, you know, one parking space for up to a 2-bedroom, and then 2 parking spaces. And it should be 2 parking spaces for 3 or more bedroom units.
So maximum of 2. And so what is it today in terms of residents?
2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Doesn't matter what
Okay.
the bedroom count is.
Mhm.
But it does currently under the provision, it does allow for waivers of certain things. And
Do- Okay, so the change would be to allow 1 space for efficiencies, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. Otherwise, it would remain the same for units that are larger than 2 bedrooms. Do you recall what we ended up allowing over at the development that's behind the post office in West Concord?
no, that was a special permit, and it was during my hiatus year. So
Oh, okay.
so under the existing combined business residence section, they can go, you know, special permit to decrease the number of parking spaces if the proposed combined business residence development is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this section, and that it will not be detrimental or injurious to the neighborhood.
Okay.
I do know that the Brookside Square development off Harold Street did have a reduction in parking.
Yeah, sure.
It definitely does not provide 2 units per residential unit.
Right.
It may be 1.5. I don't remember. That's something that I'd have to look into.
Right. Okay, so for the board, do we essentially the elevator version of that is for 1 and 2 bedrooms, going from a special permit process to get you to fewer than 2 spaces to by right, you can build that with 1 space.
It seems in line with what we're trying to do in
Mhm.
terms of better align our parking spaces with our parking requirements with what we're trying to do in town in terms of sustainability and you know, walkability and better transit.
It would also seem to encourage actually the creation of more smaller units rather than bigger units, right? A parking space is probably would be a pretty expensive thing in this space. So it seemed to me that if you were looking at this as a developer, you would build a lot of 1 and 2 bedrooms rather than building 3 bedrooms. And knowing that you don't have to go through a special permit for that might be helpful. I'm just sort of iterating on this, but does anybody else have a view on doing this by right approach versus requiring a special permit? And I think this is the first instance of where we're expanding a property right in the district.
Yeah, what I'd probably do is do a little bit more research on the unintended consequences in like the other districts, and look back at, similar Brookside Square or even 13B Com Ave, and see, how this might have changed things, because they both got a special permit, and I believe they both got waivers to the parking requirements.
Mhm.
So I can look into this a little bit more.
Okay, so that, I think that would be helpful if we have feedback, because since we do have a couple of examples where we've gone smaller. I generally, Kristen, I agree with you. I think this is in the spirit of things, and I think that this is the small change that encourages people to do in doing their development, do things like invest more in the landscaping or the design, rather than meeting a requirement for having 2 spaces when you're going to be renting to an individual or a couple that really only needs 1 space. So I like the concept, but I'd like to know a little more, Elizabeth.
Okay. And then getting into the new section. So this purpose, this, no change from what, the board has talked about as far as purpose, lot standards. From the last version, the biggest changes were trying to figure out what was appropriate in a bylaw and what was appropriate in the guidelines. So for the bylaw, it's all the more dimensional issues. So you have your, your lot standards, your setbacks. So none of these have been amended, from the versions that the board looked at previously. And then, it's still the conversation about height. And then these were, I felt it was important to reference, and I haven't finished filling out these section numbers as they relate to the design guidelines, but I felt it was important to just reference these design standards. And so when somebody looked at the bylaw, they could say, oh, okay, so these are all items that I still need to be aware of. They're in the guidelines, and here's where I should go to look for them, but not have these particular items in the zoning bylaw itself, because they really are more, you could implement, your different vertical facade modulation between different projects. So having it in a zoning bylaw, I think, makes it more a narrow focus and less flexibility in, that design feature, or, 2 architects can have different opinions and they both might be good. So that's the one specific change from the last time to this time.
One small comment: would it make sense for the title of that table to be design, dimensional design standards, requirements, and guidelines? And it's, if that's seen, design standard standard requirement. Let's see, that doesn't quite work. I'm trying, what I'm trying to get in there is the word guidelines, because I think you said there were concerns about trying to treat the guidelines as requirements, that could become problematic. Okay, so we've got, thank you, and I like that approach of having this table that will draw people right to it, and I think emphasize the fact that the reviewing standard we will have is informed by those design guidelines. The one thing I'd want to make a note of for the board, especially in light of this prior feedback we've gotten and the letter from Mr. Ellis, this concept of treating Thoreau Street and Sudbury Road differently. What we have right now, as this is proposed, is applying this similar guidelines or standards to the entire Thoreau Business District, except for we've got the concept of the principal street and the secondary street up above, together with some sort of artfully drafted setback requirements for where you get to essentially the 4-story building is got to be in the center of the Crosby's lot, and it couldn't exist anywhere on Thoreau Street. I guess what I would want to throw out, and I've made this point at prior meetings, is with respect to building height, whether we should differentiate between a principal street and a secondary street there. And to be clear and candid, what I'm attempting to do is have a different height requirements along Sudbury Road versus along Thoreau. Just throwing that out for consideration.
So the other, not to complicate the discussion, the other possibility is to leave this at 35 feet.
Mhm.
And then down here, the planning board by special permit could go up to 38 feet.
That might be more logical.
If you meet these parameters.
Okay, so as a first pass, so we focused on our planner, not you, Elizabeth, but the MAPC is focused on 38 feet because that's really the number that allows you to have ground floor commercial with 2 floors of residential above, right? And I think the idea is that it doesn't make a lot of sense in most circumstances to build 1 floor of residential because of that's the investment. I mean, you've got to have, ADA compliant entrances and elevators and all the rest, right? It's not likely you're going to do that except for a small 2-unit building. What does ADA apply to? Can you get away with 2 units, Elizabeth, before ADA applies?
I wouldn't have thought it was for a 3 or 2 residential floors on top of commercial, but I don't know.
Well, what
That's
I'm saying is, I mean, if you're putting 4 units above a
Right.
business, I think ADA probably has to
That's-
apply. So you're putting in an elevator and all the infrastructure, right? So you're really, for this to likely work for, certainly for the larger lots, you want to be able to put 2 floors of residential above the 1 floor of commercial.
I'm not, Burton, I'll have to check on the building code issue. I'm not sure you're required to put in an elevator for residential because that's not open to the public.
For apartments, maybe.
Correct.
Well, I'm wondering for rental apartments.
I still don't think that technically classifies that it's open to the public.
Okay, I'll be honest, I'm thinking back to like something I read 20 years ago about triple deckers in Somerville, so I could totally have it wrong. At any rate, the general idea being that's why this 38-foot height. That is also seems to be one of the larger points of concern that we've seen at the public hearings we've had and in the correspondence we've received.
It does, but I mean, haven't we kind of researched to address some of the issues about the height? I mean, like a 35-foot flat topped building is going to be, look more imposing than a 38-foot pitch roof building.
Right. Yep.
So, I mean, I think that we do want to allow 38 feet for just that reason, even on Thoreau Street.
Even on Thoreau, okay.
I mean, that's what I think, because I do think I'm picturing like the main street of Hudson, or even kind of some of these more, downtowns where they just come, it's not boxy. It just kind of looks like they've got, more living space and things like that, but without being overwhelming. And I think that the 38 feet will allow that, and will allow for kind of some different architecture maybe.
Okay. And I wonder how tall the actual depot building is. I bet that's well over 38 feet. But what do you think, Elizabeth?
Which building?
The depot.
Or the
itself.
restaurants on the second floor and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
The old train station.
I don't know. I mean, I can definitely
That's a
find out.
Good question.
Well, okay. So then you don't want, so my proposal, which was to say essentially 35 feet on Thoreau and 38, Kristen, you're not in favor of, you'd prefer to enable 38 on both roads. What about incrementally saying, doing the 35 feet. In other words, not changing the height from as it exists today, but allowing an additional 3 feet by special permit.
I mean, if that is a compromise that will be conducive to approval for our residents and our developers, then yes, I can certainly do that.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody else have a viewpoint on? Let's focus the discussion. Do we feel like it should be a special permit to get to 38 feet, or should that be by right?
I think the special permit route makes it easier to get it to pass. Because there was a real sticking point with people about increasing it to 38 feet. But I think if you say it's a special permit so that, if somebody comes to you and they can demonstrate that it meets the certain criteria we have laid out there, and people get to actually see what is being proposed to get to that 38 feet, I think it's easier to sell it.
Okay.
I have a question in terms of if we put it as a special permit, then it wouldn't be by right. And does that conflict at all with the whole state things in terms of qualifying?
The MBTA communities requirement?
Right.
No, height is not an issue. It's having by right 15 units per acre.
Okay.
Good
So
question.
with the changes with the parking and the changes with the open space, Chris at MAPC feels so currently the existing zoning is so restrictive, even though it doesn't specify a specific density or permitted density. It is so restrictive that DHCD would not certify that as meeting the requirements because you couldn't meet them. If you took the existing combined business residence, the existing criteria in there would, nobody would be able to meet that density requirement and all these other requirements. It's just too restrictive.
But if we say 35 feet and 38 by special permit, would that then allow 15 units per acre without, as a possibility?
I don't think that 3 feet would, I'll talk to Chris, but I don't think that 3 feet would drastically change that ability to get 15 units per acre. It may, you may not get, as much open space, or if you can't go a little bit denser, you may not get any affordable units, or, but I'll ask Chris if he, feels that would be that limiting factor, because it would be a shame to go through 2 years of work and town meeting and have it be approved and then have it not be certified.
Thank you.
Right. And that would be very regrettable. On the other hand, to Nathan's point, I also think it would be regrettable to go through all the work and then not be able to get the support of people at town meeting because they're concerned about the changing of height from 35 feet to 38 feet. And I think that if we're going the special permit route, I think there are areas in the district where it would be a no-brainer, right? I think the Crosby's lot, 125 feet, for example, from a residential property line versus the row of one-story commercial buildings along the road would have very different considerations. So I would be in favor of that, taking that approach, which is this special permit process, 35 feet by right, so unchanged. Though interesting, I'd say 35 feet is unchanged, given the dimensional standards we're requiring, it would actually be for additional restrictions would be put in place, right? Because you can't build a 35-foot box anymore, or would not be able to, but the allowing to go to 38 feet by special permit, I think makes sense. Can I see it, instead of going around the room, a show of hands in terms of for who favors the special permit route? Okay, I got Kate, Nathan. Andrew shakes his head. Linda's
I
not
have no
sure.
strong feelings about whether it's a
Okay,
permitted
all
or
right.
special permit. I will defer to whoever thinks that's the best way to get it passed.
Okay. Linda,
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it wouldn't constrain our meeting the,
Communities Act
Um,
requirements.
Yep.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a great
I'll
point.
I'll find that out tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Elizabeth, I think that means we're done with this section, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Hang on.
And for Andrew, when we say that we'd like to get this passed at town meeting, the larger picture is we want to make sure that, residents are educated about kind of the benefits of this and that they support it at town meeting. So
Right.
it's just the shorthand way that we say it.
And then, so this is just the graphic that MAPC put together showing these special permit
Okay,
criteria, as far as 125 feet from residential, 100 foot from lot line, that type of thing. Building length is pretty simple. You get 100, max 100 feet along the public right of way. And then, down the lot, there's no restriction. Open space, the dimensional requirement is 15%. Where'd it go?
can I ask one question on the 100-foot thing?
Yeah.
If you had two 80-foot wide lots and they shared and the buildings were constructed so they can share a common wall, could you have 160 feet if they're on separate lots?
You wouldn't be able to have you wouldn't be able to have a common wall on separate lots. You can only have a common wall on the same lot.
Oh, on the same lot. Okay, I got it. Okay. So you can have there are buildings in the district today with a common wall, are there? Maybe not. I don't know.
On separate lots in West Concord Village, there are, and Concord Center.
Yeah, but
I'm not sure that's
in
true
PVD.
for the Throw.
Okay.
Again, I'll have to look.
Well, yeah.
So I have to find out where I stuck open space.
There was some open space right there, right underneath the diagram.
Yeah, those are the requirements. Oh, is it in here? Open space. Oh, 15% is required if the project contains residential uses. Otherwise, if it's all just business uses, there's no open space requirement, which don't let that, don't be confused with, if it's all business uses, there are still landscape requirements. There's still, green space requirements and public space requirements. It's just not an actual larger dedicated open space area for people to use. So it's 15%. And then I'm going down to section 711.3. These are the requirements for that open space and the standards that are needed to meet the open space provisions.
Do you happen to know if there's an open space requirement, what the open space requirement is today for residential?
For a combined business residence.
Right.
Um, so this is, and this is where open space shall be provided on the lot apart from any paved area equal to twice the gross floor area of the residential portion of the building. So that's where MAPC says it's
Yeah, that's a lot.
absolutely infeasible for somebody to
Yeah.
meet that requirement. So there is a waiver provision by special permit. So it's not feasible to meet that by right criteria. If you want to have a mixed use development that has like more than 2 units. So I don't know if anybody had any comments. So Linda, can I ask you one just aside question? I was always taught that you had 2 spaces between sentences, and now Microsoft is telling me that it's only 1. Is that true?
They changed it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sue,
It's-
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yeah.
for a moment ask Sue Felsham?
Yes, Sue,
for the
please.
question?
19 Sunnyside Lane, it was 2 spaces in the days of typewriters
When we
that
typed.
had fixed width fonts where every letter was the same width as every other letter. In modern times, it's 1 space if you have an ordinary modern variable width font, 2 spaces if you're using, old fashioned Courier.
Okay.
Can you use
so
the
if
word
I'm-
kerning, Sue?
I would love to use the word kerning. This is my new soap opera, As the World Kerns.
Are you,
to tell
are
you,
you,
Two spaces, no one will shoot you except Microsoft, and you should shoot them back.
Sue, are
Okay,
you
so I can leave
a-
it 2 spaces. I automatically do 2 spaces
So do
to
I.
have it. So,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, Sue. And then these were the additional provisions that Chris had talked about. So alternative requirements for the combined business residence. And this is where you get currently the combined business residence, the residential units have to be in the same building. They can't be a standalone structure. And I don't think in the combined business residence, there's any there's no requirement other than I think in the West Concord Village that residential has to be on the 2nd or above floors and commercial only on the 1st floor. So, and then this was the last item of discussion dealing with developments of 5 to 10 units, 10%, and then over 10 units, 20%. And what the board had settled on that?
I had just one question that has to do with the separation of dwelling units and commercial units. And that is we're okaying boarding houses and hotels, extended stay hotels, whatever, which I would assume the units could be on the ground floor. But then we're saying that residences can't have that. And so I just wanted to ask the question, why is that? It seems a little contradictory to me.
I agree.
Oh. Oh, Are we all happy with that?
And so that's up in the table of uses.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't prohibit. I think it's 428 and 429.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't say that they have to be on the second, above the floor level, the ground level.
So these again are two additional uses. I mean, I can't, they're,
One thing is the definition of boarding house is a single family detached dwelling. Does that make a difference in what we're considering now for the mixed use?
yeah, because I don't think they can be single family dwellings, correct?
So then you
And-
couldn't have a boarding house there because of the definition.
Correct.
It would conflict.
Right, so you couldn't have a boarding house. So you might as well make that a no.
Change that.
And then-
And what was the other one?
And then, so the question comes down to, is a hotel, extended
Hotel.
stay hotel or a motel a use in the Thoreau Business District?
An establishment providing 4 or more rooms or suites for transient lodging accommodation. The lot on which a hotel, extended stay hotel or motel is located shall contain open space of not less than twice the gross floor area of the hotel or motel, in addition to any area required for parking. So might both of those uses not be allowed with our new requirements?
I think it would be very, very, very difficult to have a hotel or a motel in the Thoreau Business District and meet that definition requirement.
Good catch, Linda.
So I don't know if the board wants to just make this a no, just to make it easier.
I would like to do that because then otherwise we get in those really gray areas where, well, if you do this or something. So I think I would propose to put no for both of those.
I'm not opposed to that. I was just thinking about if there was to be like a boutique hotel or something like that that went in that area. But again, how they would go about meeting the requirements would be pretty difficult. But I don't know that I want to say no, just because it would be difficult for them to do so.
So you can make this one a no. And this one is special permit. And crickets.
I'm happy with that. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with that.
Do you want me to move on, Burton?
Yeah, I'm good with it. Thank you.
So open space. All right, so we're back to the question of affordable units.
And are you looking for our feedback on the 10%?
So 10% so currently affordable units are not required for projects of 4 or
Wonderful.
Developments of 4 or more units, at least 20% of the dwelling units and no less than 1 are available for affordable housing. Again, this is where Chris, it's another piece in that the whole
got it.
bylaw that makes it impossible for somebody to meet all these requirements and meet the MBTA community requirements. So it was, 4 or fewer, there wouldn't be enough, affordable unit requirement. 5 to 10, 10%, and then over 10, 20%. But she provided, the information from other communities in a different table, which I can bring that up.
Well, no, I mean, I actually thought we had sort of settled on this already, but let me ask the board, I mean, because we had a lot of discussion on this, and I think we sort of at least penciled in 10% here. Does anybody have an objection to this or feel the need to revisit any of the thinking on why we would lessen the affordability requirements here for projects below 10 units or 10 units or less? I'm seeing shaken heads. The only one I'm not seeing shaking her head is Linda. Are you okay with this one as written?
Yes, just refresh me on the 40R requirements for smart growth zoning. Is that 20%?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know I can definitely find out. All right, so I'll do a little bit
I
more
think it's
research
fine.
on that. And the board can talk about it next time with formula business.
Great. Okay.
And then lastly is parking. So, location of parking, to the side or rear of the building. This is something that Chris added, and I'm not sure it's necessary, because I think even in my mind, it creates, it creates so many other questions, because, the board isn't developing this as a 40R site. I think in the beginning, Chris was, that was one of the things on the table for discussion, but then as things move forward, trying to go that direction with the Thoreau Depot Business District is not a very large district, so I think it becomes much more challenging to try and implement the 40R requirements. So I think this is kind of a holdover, and if this were to be left in here, I think it would create so many questions that can't be answered. If by chance, how this comes out and 40R, does seem to work, if, certain provisions are changed, or, how it begins to, develop, you can always, do another zoning bylaw amendment. You basically get 10, every 10 months you have, or 9 months. So my recommendation would be to take this section out.
Elizabeth, I agree with you. I think it's kind of out of left field, and I think there'll be if there will be concerns around parking to begin with, without having the other elements of this 40R. I think that this is going to cause concern where there needn't be any. It's my view. Does anybody else want to keep it in? Okay. We take your advice, Elizabeth. Thank you.
So other than a combined business residence, all the other parking requirements would be the same. And then it just gets into having this, section for reduction in the required parking, for shared parking, and setting the parameters for when a special permit can be issued to allow that reduction. And it goes through, all the different requirements. If somebody wants a reduction, you cannot go, more than 30%. But any reduction, you would have to get a special permit and go through and meet all of these different criteria, parking reduction methods, things that you would need to implement or provide to, complement a reduction in parking. And then currently in the bylaw, off-site parking is allowed. And this just sets up a couple more specific parameters for when off-site parking is permitted. The 600-foot distance, I believe, is the same as what's currently in there, but it's these other pedestrian access. And so that's the end.
If I could make one suggestion on this, this is wordsmithing. In the introductory sentence, when I read that, I thought by right they could get, if they were combining these uses, they could maybe reduce by not more than 30%. And then you talk about the special permit. I kind of want to add to the end of that first sentence, the number of parking may be reduced by not more than 30% subject to the following requirements, or something along those lines. So it's clear that that first sentence means the special permit process. It's just the cap on it. Do you get my point? That would be another way to do it. And you could probably then get rid of it. Yeah, there. You could probably just say the planning board. Yeah. And this is this all new, or is this modification from the existing combined business residential district parking requirements?
This is all new.
Okay.
Make a note to renumber that section too,
Yeah.
since you're moving.
Yeah, all of them. Sorry.
And no, I'll have to go back and check all the numbers.
Do board members have questions about particular, about the logic to this, the elements that would be, the methods that could be used to reduce parking requirements? Anything like that? I mean, I think this is like the, what this reminds me of is the situation you have with the parking around so Woods Hill Table in West Concord. You've got an empty commuter rail parking lot behind it at night because there's no commuters there, and a very full restaurant parking lot. And then vice versa during the day, you've got an empty restaurant parking lot and a packed commuter parking lot. And being able to combine those uses based around the time of day is a really good thing. I mean, I think it makes sense. I think having a floor, having very specific of 30%, having very specific things that a developer could look at when she's designing the project and that we can look at when reviewing, I think it's pretty good. I can imagine these things will get tweaked over time, but to me that this from whole cloth, this is, I really like this. Okay, we're at the end. It is 8:55. What I would suggest is now we've got a couple of other things that we're hoping to get to tonight. One of which is FAR, and the stuff that Kate's put together on that. We also had the facts, the FAQs for this, and the design guidelines themselves. But I think maybe we've really gone through the meat of it here. So maybe we could pause here if the rest of the board makes sense, if it makes sense, get some public comment. And then we can see if we've got time to consider to continue to get through the FAQs. But I think we probably fleshed out the big issues. Does anybody object to that? Okay, so with that,
So
yes.
Burton, just to kind of, frame things for the board, it's October 12th.
Mhm.
The warrant doesn't close till February 2nd. So basically you have a whole extra month. Kate provided some proposed changes to the FAQ, which I can circulate that to everybody and post it, and then you can have that discussion in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't want the board to think and the same thing with the design guidelines. Nothing has changed in the design guidelines from all the drafts that you have seen.
Right.
It's primarily the zoning that has changed. So if you want to, after public comment, you can table discussion on those two items to the
Thanks.
to the next meeting if you want as well.
Thanks. And just on that note, I saw your comment that it was at least feasible that we could have a third and final public hearing between now and the warrant closing, right?
A public forum, yes.
Public
not
forum, thank you.
It wouldn't be a public hearing, but
Public
a
forum
public forum, yes.
with a hybrid
So-
forum.
Yes, so in talking with Chris Carmody in the town manager's office and Aaron Stevens, the public information officer, they both have they have much more Zoom experience than I do as far as the hybrid meeting setup. And the townhouse should be ready to go sometime in the beginning of November. So putting everything together and working with Chris at MAPC, a tentative date of December 14th. Because you don't want to have necessarily a meeting right before Thanksgiving, and your next November meeting is November 28th, which is, I think, 3 days after Thanksgiving. But you don't want to push it off to, after January 1st. So that was the date we were kind of proposing.
Is that a Tuesday? I'm just trying to get there on my calendar. Do you know what day of the week that is?
It's a Tuesday.
Oh, okay. All right, great. I mean, that sounds good. I mean, I think that we've got some more work to do, but we've made a lot of progress. We're getting reasonably close. And I think it's really important that if it's feasible, that we would have that forum so that we can present this, members of the public can raise their concerns or points or encouragement, and we can go from there. So with that, maybe we get Kristen, yes?
Sorry, one of the things that we said we were going to do was try to do more education around smart growth. Is that something that the public information officer could help us with?
Definitely.
All right, so let's think about how we might be able to kind of do a little campaign around that, because I think there's some really good data about around smart growth and kind of what's been happening in other communities that might address some of the concerns and objections that people have had.
Okay. And if you've got examples you can point us to,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Yeah,
Um,
let me try to kind of work with Elizabeth so she can work with the information officer, because we're only going to be able to have that kind of one meeting. And, you know, there's only going to be so much we could do. But there's going to be like back and forth in the Concord
Right.
Journal and stuff like that. So,
So Kristen, if you're volunteering, I will put you in contact with Erin.
okay.
What everybody doesn't know is she is finishing up a degree in urban planning in planning.
Oh,
So yeah, so she's chomping at the bit to help the board out with this project. So
okay. That's great.
um,
She'll have some good ideas then
yeah,
also.
I think
Thank you.
so.
Okay, great suggestion, Kristen. Thank you. And with that, if you are a member of the public and we have a question or comment, we can welcome that now. Just raise your hand or take yourself off mute and identify yourself by name and address. And I see Sue got your hand up first. So
I
please.
did, and I am going to make you happy by saying that I have just typed you up a big fat email and that I'm going to send, and so I have nothing to say right now.
We
So
will.
I'm torturing you with that.
We will be sure to read it, Sue. Thank you. Carol, see your hand raised.
Hi, everybody. Carol Savoy, 61 Belknap Street, Concord. I had a couple questions. One, just on the smart growth initiative you were just talking about, the other communities that you were looking at as comparisons. It would be nice to hear about what Lincoln, Belmont, and Weston are doing, since they're on the same, MBTA line going into Boston and similar type communities. Are those in your comparison that you're looking at for smart growth?
Good question. I will get back to you once I have my notes. So thank you.
Yeah, okay. And then in regards to the primary and secondary districts treating Thoreau and Crosby's differently, I think that's a great idea. And I was wondering, when you were looking at the 35 feet in the Thoreau area, there was a lot of discussion about it being a flat roof. Is it possible to have 35 feet and a pitched roof?
That is so to be clear, it's not two separate districts, but the effect of primarily the front setback from the principal street and the secondary street would be distinguished between Sudbury, which would be a broader boulevard as a result with the setbacks, and Thoreau. The requirement for a pitched roof is in the entire Thoreau business district. So if you were to go to, and so where we have things in the draft as of now is keeping it at 35 feet, you could go to 38 by special permit, and throughout the district, you'd be required to have a pitched roof, a mansard or a front, sideways pitched or front, there's the examples that we just had up in the draft zoning bylaw. So that would be on Thoreau Street as well.
Okay, but I guess I got all of that. It's kind of a nuance, but if it's 35 feet on Thoreau Street, could it have a pitched roof at 35 versus going to the 38-foot special permit?
Yes, as drafted, you could have a pitched roof where the top of the pitched roof is 35 feet tall on Thoreau Street. So that would be a reduction in what you could build today.
Okay, but in theory, it's possible. You could have 35 feet with a pitched roof.
Yeah, where the top of the pitched roof is at 35 feet.
Okay.
And so today what's possible is 35 feet with a flat roof.
Okay, so if you have a pitched roof, it still could happen. So when you did your shadow comparison, it was only done with a flat roof. And then it did a 38-foot with a pitched roof and said, oh, well, the pitched roof is going to cast less shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So if you did a 35-foot with a pitched roof, has there been any analysis about the shadow casting with 35-foot pitched versus the 35-foot flat?
I think just the geometry suggests the shadows will be smaller. I mean, I guess we could do that analysis, but unless somebody was pro shadow, that would be an improvement.
Right, right. Well, I guess it's just sort of the way it's being laid out is, well, if you're only doing 35 feet, you get a flat roof and that's going to cast more shadows. So you don't want that. You want to go to a 38 foot so you can have a pitched roof and less shadows. But the other option is 35 feet with a pitched roof, which will cast even less shadows.
Right, which is what's currently proposed by after tonight's discussion. I guess the reason for the pitched roof is not to enable additional height. The reason for the pitched roof was primarily based upon feedback at the 2 prior public forums where people liked that design as a traditional village center New England type of building. And then the separate consideration is whether we should enable to go three additional feet higher than is allowed today, so that you can have 2 floors of residential on top of commercial. They're intertwined issues, but they're distinct. But to be clear, today, after tonight's discussion, we're actually proposing by right, what would be allowed by right would be a reduction in the effective buildable height, because you could no longer build a 30-foot high flat roof. Instead, you would have to have it pitched, which would result in a less shadow than was shown in the shadow study.
Got it. Okay. And then just taking the shadow study one step further, it was only shown over Dunkin' Donuts. It wasn't shown over like Crease Cleaners to Concord Provisions or the rest of the area, which is where, my house abuts. So if it goes up 3 floors or 35 feet, that casts shadow in my yard all day long, right? And it blocks my view. And, has there been any shadow effect on residential communities, not just the streets?
So I want to be clear that what was being shown was a comparison from what can be built today in terms of casting a shadow in your yard, and what could be built under this zoning. And the idea of the representative examples was to show that by requiring these design standards, it would reduce the effective shadow. Now, Elizabeth, I presume that those representative examples were chosen because the 2 locations on each street, but on each main street, but the intent was not to do one for the entire district, right? Or is that somewhere in a file?
No, and there is no funding to do it for the entire district.
Right, and under the town zoning today, there's no provisions for taking into account beyond ancient common law that's out there, the provision for shadows, whether or not a building casts a shadow, right?
I don't know off the top of my head other than if something, whether there's something that completely precludes somebody from, solar access.
There's some common law rights, but it's got to be pretty extreme. I get it. So Carol, thank you for your comments. I think that the point of the shadow study was not because there's any requirement to do a shadow study. Again, there's no particular projects that's been proposed, so nobody's doing an impact study on a particular building. The point was to show that what the design guidelines drive is overall a reduction in the amount of shadow that would be cast by a building built under these design guidelines versus the non-existent design guidelines that are in place today, or the fact that there's none in place today. I think that was the point. I suppose if there was a particular project that was being built in terms of how that impacted the surrounding property, if it required a special permit at that point, if they were going for 38 feet, for example, then that could be something that could be sought.
Okay. I'm gonna kind of switch subjects over to my favorite, parking. I still think, and I appreciate Elizabeth looking into that to see, what have been the repercussions of the reduced parking in other areas of the town. But I think with the, we're still talking about, 60 new units at Crosby Street, at Crosby's, and 10 to 15 on Thoreau Street.
So
So-
Carol, can you elaborate on where you got those figures? Because there's been no study, and Chris has looked at things and given, based on projects he's looked at, possibilities. But so I'm very hesitant to have you keep throwing out those numbers when there isn't a project and it's based on Chris assuming certain parameters that nobody can define at this point.
Well, I did get them from Chris, and he's the expert. He's been doing this in other neighborhoods, other surrounding communities. He works for the state and he's advising the town. So I think he's a pretty good resource. When I had the discussion with him, he told me there would be, 4 buildings, roughly 4 stories high, maybe some 3 in Crosby's parking lot, which would be 63 new units. I rounded to 60 is kind of what he came up with. And then he said on Thoreau Street, if you, go from Priest Cleaners down to Dunkin' Donuts and go up, 2 floors of housing, that could be 10 to 15 units. So I rounded to 10. So, that's 70 new units and 140 parking spots if it's a ×2. And if it's a ×1, that's 70 parking spots. That's a big difference, right? And if there's only 70 parking spots allocated, to over, possibly 140 people living there, where are these cars going to go? And
Well, they
when you
can't park
throw
on
in
the
the commuter
street.
parking, that's already there, and the retail and the vibrant community, it just doesn't add up, right? And so I think the reduction in parking from 2 spots to 1 spot, is just going to cause, excess cars to put, and where are they going to go? They're going to park all on the side streets like they did, when people used to take the train into town, right? But now you've got more people living here, you got a denser community, and you've got less parking spots, and you've taken away the commuter parking, which hasn't even been addressed. Reducing it from 2 to 1 parking spot. I think there's going to be a real problem. I think
Carol,
you guys
maybe
are
if I can
glossing
address-
over it.
Maybe I can address a few of your points. So as you know, you can't park on the street in the wintertime in Concord. So a homeowner or an apartment renter that has 2 cars would not buy or rent a unit that only came with 1 space, right? Because then they need to find storage for their car for 6 months of the year, right? So that may alleviate some of those issues. With respect to the commuter parking lot, that's a separate issue in terms of if you're talking about the lease spaces and that the town leases on a year-to-year basis.
Right, they're 2 different issues. There's one, we're building all these new units. There's people going to be living in there, and they're going to
Well-
want a parking spot, right?
Carol, can I make a suggestion? Because I've heard you and you made a comment before where you said like people you haven't heard a lot about this because people are just finding out about it. And something similar happened to the board when we were permitting this. We're attempting to pass something for Starbucks, and then it was a big groundswell kind of at the last minute of neighbors. So I would just encourage you, if you think it's true that a lot of people feel the way you do, to have them write a letter to the planning board, because I don't think that we're here. I think we're hearing your message loud and clear, but I would just encourage you to have other people send in their comments that are similar to yours, because I don't think necessarily we're hearing those comments from others.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I have reached out to them and expressed that you guys would be more than willing to listen to, their comments, and I will thoroughly encourage them. It just, a lot of people don't have the energy, quite frankly. And, they have other things to do, and, they'll let me be the loud voice for them. But, they can vote too, and maybe they'll make their voices heard when it's time to vote in April, you know? Maybe they just don't want to attend this or don't feel the energy to write a letter, but I will encourage them too, because I can't be the only one screaming about it. I just don't think people know about it, right? Or they don't have the energy and they have other things in their life to do that, you know, they just don't really want to fight the issue. They'll just vote against it, right? But I'll do what I can. I point taken, and I think it's a valid one. My final part about parking I wanted to mention is when you're looking at parking, there is across from Starbucks, a housing development or apartments next to the mobile station. I think it's 159 to 163 Thoreau Street. I don't know if you know it, 153 to 165 Thoreau Street. It's a bunch of apartments right across from Starbucks. The question is, you know, that's not included in the development district, but, you know, I think you could put, you know, more density in there if you wanted to put more apartments, number one. And secondly, in regards to parking, maybe take a look at what their parking requirements are, since it's right in the district already, and it seems to be a pretty big development there.
Elizabeth, is that a Concord Housing? When was that built?
I'm checking right now.
So Carol, your point being we should use that as an example of for what an appropriate level of parking is, or an inappropriate level of parking, or that it should be included in the district? I wasn't quite clear on your point.
Yeah, well, there's 2 points. The first one is, I don't know how much parking they have per unit there, but, you know, is it 2 parking spots per unit and is it adequate there, right? Or is it less than that and is it not adequate? It's just a good example of something that's been around for a while in the district, right? That has apartments that require parking, right? And so is all that parking being used, right? And is that an example of what's going to happen if we build more housing? So that's sort of number one. Number two is it seems that, you know, you guys want to increase housing or mixed use housing within, you know, the Thoreau Depot district. Well, that already is housing, and it seems to have a lot of green space or space to go up 38 feet or connect the buildings and pour more housing. I think one of the greener ways to build housing is take existing buildings and, you know, add on to them or repurpose them. So has the thought been given to, you know, expand that particular development?
So I want to be, there's maybe some confusion. We don't get to build projects. We don't get to dictate who does what with their private property. That may be town property. Am I correct, Elizabeth?
No.
No, that's private property. Okay.
Yep, and so that's what is it called? Thoreau Gardens. That was built around 1968 when the town
68.
actually did have a garden apartment bylaw, which
Okay.
was deleted. I don't know when, Marcia would know, but so it was built under that provision. The same thing with Concord Green. That was built. I know Pamela Dritt is online. She may or may not. I mean, there's over 200 and something units at Concord Green.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'd have to, Marcia would know what the parking requirements are. So I can check into that tomorrow.
So while we could conceivably rezone that, we can't say, let's build more housing there.
I can tell you how Concord Green does it.
Okay.
There's one covered parking spot per unit, and the rest of the parking in the area is common parking without reservation.
Okay.
So all the units that have two cars, one is in the shed, and one has to be moved whenever it snows. And guests can park in any of the non-covered parking spots.
Pamela, do you know if the uncovered, undeeded spots is it the equivalent of one additional space per unit?
Well, let's see.
That's a, Nathan, that's okay.
Probably
I'll figure
fairly
I'll figure it
close.
out tomorrow. Yeah, Pamela, that's okay. Marcia has all those numbers. I can figure that out tomorrow.
Thanks.
Great, well, thank you. That's all the questions I had for tonight.
Okay, the next hand I see is Pamela. So you've got the floor if you want to state your name and address for the record. You're on mute, Pamela.
Sorry. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. No, yes. And I thank you for doing all this hard work. But do we have the flexibility in the overall plan such that if there was a brilliant but unconventional proposal that it could be considered? Because often neat ideas that we might really want to encourage if we knew they were possible wouldn't even be proposed if there wasn't some way.
So
And-
Pamela, are you asking about the sort of the exception to the rule powers of under a special permit process?
Yes, yes. And also, when you have a bunch of things that say no, what if there was a brilliant, like combined business residence group that are probably categorized as a no? At least
So-
if you have a special permit,
Yeah.
can't you consider them?
Well, so I think you answered your own question. If it says no, then you need a variance, right? And that's that. Elizabeth, you're
The
shaking your
town-
head.
Nope, the town does not allow use variances.
No use variances. Okay, so then no, the answer is no. The ones that are a special permit would allow you to apply for a special permit for that review.
And so everything, then I urge you to reconsider the number of things you said no to, as opposed to special permits to, because it would give you the flexibility to allow some brilliant things that, and it wouldn't require you to allow by right things that aren't beneficial to the community. And also, I haven't yet seen in there the incentives for like all electric, net zero, solar, or other beneficial building techniques that Concord has repeatedly shown we want by passing in town meetings, but that we're not able to legally require, that would allow, for example, height waivers or parking waivers or something that is a carrot that would allow us, say exceptions for affordable housing for doing this, or something that would encourage by giving a carrot to builders to do that. Because
Okay.
right now there's no reason that they should. And because builders are conservative, they often don't, even though it's in their best interest to do so. For example, where is the provision for electric vehicle charging here in this plan? This is going to be a major change in how the world works, and it's coming fast.
So Burton, I can answer that. For any project that happens in the Thoreau Depot Business District, they would also be required to go through site plan approval. And as part of the site plan approval process, there is already a sustainability criteria. And that is where like 13B Commonwealth Ave, when they came through as part of their site plan, meeting that site plan criteria is, as you know, was the whole discussion about being all electric. The planning board brought in the discussion of requiring the EV charging station in the parking lot. So that provision is already in the zoning bylaw as part of site plan review.
so that it improves their ability to get by right designs accepted?
It doesn't improve their ability. It's a requirement as part of site plan review that they meet that sustainability requirement.
Is there something in our bylaw that we just kind of went over that you can point to that refers that, or is there in another section?
Nope, it's in the site plan criteria. It's criteria.
It's in the site plan that would then refer to this. Okay. So we
Yep.
weren't just discussing it in kind of this new part of the bylaw, but the existing bylaw would already kind of refer to this district.
So any project in this district would require site plan approval, and that's in the table of uses, where it says, whether it's R or NR. So everything it would require site plan approval, and criteria H under section 11.8.5, incorporation of sustainability and resiliency principles into the site design that result in a plan that is responsive to the environment and actively contributes to the development of a more sustainable community. So that's already a requirement in the site plan criteria that they have to meet.
Would they be able to put in natural gas utilities and still meet that requirement? Because that's just greenwashing if so.
The planning board and the town does not have the ability to not allow somebody to have natural gas. So until
But
that's
you
handled
can
at the state.
incentivize them. That's what
If-
I'm trying to get you to do. Put in the zoning that if they do that, then they get something.
Thank you,
Surely
Pamela. Yeah, thank you. It's a great point. I think that on the board, we're constantly balancing comments, concerns like yours versus, for example, Carol's comments about a concern about being too permissive with allowing a reduction in parking or too permissive in allowance of creation of height or additional density. So it's a balancing act. I appreciate the input.
Yes.
And it's well noted. And I think, our discussion that maybe we won't have tonight, but we were planning to on the FAR discussion is very much focused on exactly that mechanism. What types of incentives can you put in place to allow a developer to, build something in addition in exchange for meeting a town goal. And so we're hearing you on that, and we appreciate your input.
Burton, can I make a suggestion?
Yes, Kate.
Because Haley's not here, so I want to. I think we do mean to look holistically at what we're doing for Throw Depot and think about green zoning. I don't think we've really done that yet. So to Pamela's point, can we maybe put this in the category of Linda's point about formula business? Like when the next time we talk about this, maybe along with formula business, we can talk about green zoning for the district.
Sure. When you say green zoning, can you be a little more specific than that?
No, Haley will. No, but I mean, I think we can ask ourselves the question, like, are we doing everything we can for green zoning that makes sense to do? That's the question.
Okay.
And maybe you think we already know that answer, but I don't know that we do.
Okay.
One
Well,
more, just one.
One quick point. Yes, Pamela.
The new bank building on the corner of Baker Ave in West Concord and Main Street there, they chopped down a gorgeous tree on the corner, a mature tree. First, they piled up the dirt around it. I talked to the man who was in charge of the building there, and he said he was also going to chop down another one on the corner of the lot. A large red maple, at least a half a century old, 2-foot trunk or more diameter, huge, gorgeous in the fall, to put a dumpster. Now, I talked to him today, and he said, and they already chopped down the one on Baker Avenue. And he said that it wasn't going to be chopped down, but he said, it's the planning board's fault. You know, we're just doing the things we were told, and go talk to them. Is
So
there a
this
way
is, so this is a completely separate issue from the discussion. Currently, the Chase Bank has some other significant issues that they're going to have to work with the building commissioner and myself to address with non-compliance for that approved project. So as part of that discussion, I'll review what was allowed, because where that dumpster is located, I'm not sure where the wetland buffer ends, but trees were definitely discussed as part of that project. So they have quite a few other significant issues to resolve. So I'll bring that up with the building commissioner.
And should they be having solar on that flat roof and battery backup?
That's irrelevant for this discussion tonight. The project's already been approved, but I don't think that was proposed, no.
We need some way to encourage them to think of that.
Okay, thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
I see a few other members of the public and Linda Escobedo here. Anybody else have any comments on the proposed zoning bylaw? Okay, we had on the agenda the FAR discussion, and Kate, you circulated some materials right before that. I'm sensitive to the fact that it's 9:30 already, and that is worthy of some real focus. How do people want to continue to stick around and try to tackle that? I would say in no more than the next 28 minutes and be done with it, or and stick to that, or should we table that and talk about it when we can give it a more fulsome discussion?
Can I say my preference?
Yes, of course, Kate.
So if I can frame it out to where I think we are with it, a couple weeks ago, maybe more than that, we had a good discussion about a proposed FAR revision to the formula. And now we're kind of 6 weeks later, and this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that we have, if folks want to go forward with it, that we have a public forum, perhaps a month from now in mid-November. And in that forum, we can present a couple different formulas that folks want to present to the public, and also have a couple ideas for standards, and not put too much pressure on ourselves to really figure this out, but rather just put something together that makes sense to put out for public input, because I think we have a lot of expertise out in Concord, and we just need to find the right way to capitalize on it. So one I guess proposal that I would put out there is, if folks could look at the current formula, and if you have ideas, if you don't think it's quite right and you have ideas, I would love it if you could actually play around with the formula and suggest, like, make your own proposal. And that maybe could help us put together like 2 or 3 formulas that we're saying, like, this is what we're thinking, ABC. Because sometimes the discussions that we have without really sitting down and seeing how the numbers work don't lead to revised proposals. So I guess that's what I would suggest, is that folks take the latest proposal, which is the same one as 6 weeks ago, and if you react to it, you think it's not quite right, I would ask you to sit down and kind of futz with the numbers and come up with a different proposal. Does that make I'm interested in kind of what you think about that, Burton or Elizabeth, as a way forward?
And I was engaged in at least part of these discussions related to the FAR, and I had a question, I guess, fundamentally about how it relates to the idea of green zoning. I guess that there was the proposal on the board or on the floor to connect a sustainable build to a improved FAR formula or something like that. And I was wondering where the legal authority to do that came from, because it's a good idea. I had just in using the FAR numbers, and I did exactly what Kate proposed, and I was playing with them and found out that the new green numbers put out there only affected 9 properties. So it wouldn't actually have that. I mean, that's about 10%, I guess. So it's not a fundamental change, but it's a tweak. But where MGLA 40A Section 3 actually says that the town can regulate bulk height and surface area, but can't mandate certain building materials and can't go beyond that. I wondered where the authority to regulate height, bulk, and surface area to the extent of saying that this one thing that's a different size is better, where that authority comes from. I think it seems clear that there's a global authority to reduce bulk and size, but I just didn't know if the green zoning part is an appropriate part of this discussion. The miniaturization part is clearly in line, but I just didn't know if the green component was something that should be mixed in here, because I just didn't know where it came from.
So Andrew, your question is whether you can de facto enforce green building standards by using this provision of the zoning law, or whether that is too cute by we're effectively regulating building materials and the like by turning it into an incentive program.
Or overstepping your authority to regulate height and bulk by saying that 2 fundamentally similar properties are that you're regulating them to different standards based on the materials, not their size.
Yeah, that's a
Good
But it doesn't
question.
make oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, good question, and one that I would have to ask legal counsel.
And then I also tried to look deeper into, I guess Somerville was brought up as a standard that has 0 carbon building or whatever the standard is for units that are over 25,000 square feet. And I tried to figure out where that distinction comes from. And the only thing I could figure out was that likely once it reaches 25,000 square feet, it's no longer considered a residential development. It's de facto a commercial development. So therefore it's regulated differently. I couldn't figure out another reason why. But that's just a fundamental question of how they were able to do it, but only with a distinction of a very large building. Because that would be another route to possibly find out how to do it, if it's appropriate.
Well, and Haley had talked to Kate, maybe know these, but Haley had been talking about examples of this incentivizing that we've seen in Amherst, at least as, not that we'd model it after that, but that there were at least examples. I guess, Elizabeth, it would be really helpful to know, how far can you go with something where you're regulating, as Andrew, you put it really well, where you're regulating dimensional requirements and tying it to something that we don't have the authority to directly regulate.
So the distinction in some of these other communities where they do have those incentives are areas where somebody has the right to do something. And to your question, Andrew, on the just strictly the FAR dealing with size, bulk, scale, and height, I think that's a great question. And how you've framed it, I start to think, well, yeah, the Attorney General might throw that out if you try and slide green zoning and sustainability into 2 equal projects, and so that's not size, bulk, and scale. For the other communities that have adopted some incentives, it's through a special permit process by where it's like, here's your permitted use, and we'll let you have a denser project or some incentive if you do it this way through a special permit process. So that's the only way I think that communities have gotten those types of things passed. But you know, I'll have to check with Lexington. You may be right, if something goes over 25,000 square feet, whether, you know, you have to
Yeah.
meet commercial standards, or I don't know.
Oh, so the idea is that if the FAR becomes within the sustainable build, it becomes a special permit question as opposed to, is
Well,
that how you would accomplish it?
if you were to try and make the sustainable FAR through a special permit, I don't think anybody would use it. It's going through that process may not be worth it. So to Kate's point, it may be, you know, there's, I can think of, you know, 4 local, very local developers who would be happy to review any, you know, any proposal, and they will gladly give you their opinion as far as, you know, implementing it, or, you know, what some of, you know, their issues would be. And so, I mean, I agree, that's definitely something that, you know, the board, you know, can and should think about doing. Yeah.
So Elizabeth, are you really gonna go to town council with that question? Because if you are, I think the question of is distinct from the question on, is it okay to incentivize these things that are otherwise prohibited in terms of building materials or, you know, whatever else. But I think it's a distinct question because it's regulated differently, is the question of tying it to the fossil fuels. So if you are going to them, can you ask them that same question from Andrew, but say, you know we're not allowed to prohibit fossil fuel hiccups, but can we make it part of an incentive? And I have my doubts on that myself, on the fossil fuel question. I'm feeling more confident on the other question based on, so can I just add that to your list?
Technically, I do not have access to town council unless it is approved by the town manager. But currently there are a lot of things happening between planning and town council on some other projects and litigation. So I might be able to slide that question in.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's that straightforward. I was going to ask the other attorneys to kind of look at some of the rulings from the Attorney General if we can't get town council on that question.
Can the Attorney General, can't we ask the Attorney General's office directly?
I do not believe so.
Oh, I mean, when she's on NPR, you can call and ask the Attorney General.
Well, I was I mean, I've gotten some materials through their office. They might give you a read on it, but we also know that the Attorney General's not the last stop with some of the stuff either. But
Linda had her hand up too.
This is sort of a different angle I've been trying to think about, and that has to do with more the issue of character and the neighborhood districts that we've been thinking about. And I wondered if the FAR could deal with that. And sort of as an example, so you had 2 identical houses, but one was on a street where the neighbors at that street also had similar, small houses on their property. And as a second house was on an area where McMansions were already being built. Could you have like a relative component to the FAR so that you would essentially provide fewer limitations if the neighborhood is already essentially turned to McMansions? However, you had more constraints if the contiguous properties all remained small, so that you could get more of that neighborhood character to stay in place for certain neighborhoods, and then others where you were going to have less impact. You would have less constraints on the owners of the properties where their neighbors had already benefited from, development. So, and I don't know if there are any examples of towns that do that.
The issue I see with that as far as under the zoning act is you're required to have these defined districts, and the dimensional and zoning requirements within these defined districts, and it would become much more challenging to now try and define a neighborhood and have a one set of criteria and define a different neighborhood, and they may not all be in the same zoning district. And so I think that would then start to really create an issue with how it would requirements of the zoning act and having defined districts.
So you couldn't say, look at the abutters and say, if all the abutting houses are 2,000 square feet, that property couldn't they couldn't increase the size of the house, but maybe by 30%, or 10% in another area where the abutting properties are all 4,000 square feet.
Yeah.
That house could be larger in terms of.
Yeah. Just knowing what happens at the Board of Appeals when they get special permits to expand a house on a non-conforming lot by more than 50%. Direct abutters does not define a neighborhood. And
right. Okay.
I mean, when the Board of Appeals has to address that issue, they do expand much further than that to look at what's conforming and the square footage of homes and what's non-conforming and the square footage of homes, and how a neighborhood might be in transition because of conforming lots. And when they do that analysis, they really are looking at the floor area ratio and how a neighborhood can change, how all the conforming lots in a neighborhood can change. So, I mean, the floor area ratio has, at least for the Board of Appeals, is definitely being used as a level of measurement when they're getting these special permit requests. So you're just lowering the floor area ratio to, as Kate said, some measure where, I think in the resident C zone district, the, current FAR and to oh, sorry, I'm going to start coughing again. I ran out of water. The previous graph that Kate had provided, when you look at the existing floor area ratio formula, and then Kate spoke with Matt, and he had a slight tweak to this. The FAR on those very smaller lots, 5,000 square feet, 6,000 square feet, primarily in the resident C zone districts, has been working, fairly well. And it really is those neighborhoods where you're kind of, I don't know, I'm going to say 12,000 to 20,000 square feet, where you're seeing, a much more significant impact on how neighborhoods are changing. When you get up to 40,000 square feet, the impact on the neighborhood is, yes, it's the size of the house, but it's also the amount of green space there used to be between houses. So it's not just the house when you get into those larger homes. The larger lots. It's that reduction in green space around them. Because like in the Resident C zone district, there's limited green space between the structures, and so it really is becoming the size, the bulk, and the scale in the Resident C, because you have 15 feet and 15 feet, so the green space between the homes doesn't change, but the visual massing of the homes. And so I think the FAR has helped in Resident C, and in B and A. I don't see how it hasn't been that effective like it has in C. So
Thank you.
Linda, it sounds like what you're describing is more like a neighborhood conservation district, and like what Elizabeth was just alluding to, having different districts, but just
Right, well, trying to get to that without having to get everyone in the neighborhood buy into it. I mean, if you could do it that way.
I just wanted to pick up on something that Andrew said, which is, this would affect 9 houses. I think you probably meant like in one year, Andrew. But if this like one outcome of this, if it acts as an incentive, is that year we have 9. If we tie it to a standard, let's say that it has to be a passive energy house, that would be the standard, that you have to certify that it's passive energy. Then you would have 9 passive builds in Concord that year, which would be huge.
It's not per year. It's total from 2016 to 2019. There were 129 houses. This would affect 9.
There were 129 houses. This would affect 9. Okay. So anyways, like that, I mean, if we've been saying that there's really ways to do really efficient builds, and builders just aren't doing it because they're kind of stuck in their ways and they don't realize that it's just cost effective to do this. So like if we're creating even a couple of houses every year that are passive or more energy efficient, I think that's a win for us if we can do that. I mean, I guess I have to look back at those numbers because so I just wanted to mention that, and hopefully it catches on, hopefully a builder does it, and then they, if what we're saying is right, which that is cost effective and people want it, then these builders, they build one, then they realize it's a good idea and they keep doing it. So just want to mention that.
So I think it gets back to, the purpose of the floor area ratio was specifically mansionization, size, bulk, and scale. And it wasn't sustainability. Yes, there's the whole principle of smaller houses use less energy, but when 2003, when the town first got the Tainter report, sustainability, that wasn't the focus. It's somewhat similar to the PRD, where when the PRD bylaw was first established, its goal had to do with open space. Affordable dwellings was not a key focus. And so over the years, it's kind of evolving to try and settle both of those requirements, and it does become challenging. So yes, the board, one of the board's goals is to look at green zoning and how to initiate more zoning that focuses on sustainability principles in green zoning. But I don't think every single zoning bylaw that you look at necessarily is going to fit that criteria. So is, changing the floor area ratio, is that, is trying to implement green zoning along with that? It may become more challenging. So it's trying to figure out, what's the main purpose and focus on that purpose. And, if figuring out how you can accomplish, everything becomes really challenging. And that's where you start getting into trying to develop a zoning bylaw where every time you discuss it, it becomes a little bit more convoluted, or it becomes a little bit more, challenging to try and, work out all the knots in the yarn. And so I think when that starts to begin to happen, it's having the board go back and, okay, so what is the purpose of, that bylaw? And, do we need to agree that that purpose needs to be expanded, or just what that bylaw was designed to do needs to be implemented stronger or have more teeth or whatever. So
Actually see that, like, I'm thinking of this as they're complementary. They're not fighting each other. So for example, with the FAR, if we just drop it, I think that people would be really concerned about impacting their property values, and we get more. I think it'd be harder to pass something that we just drop versus something that has an incentive in it. So if we drop it and people say, I don't want to do that, and we say, well, you don't have to, here's your other option. We're giving them choice between two options versus just dropping it. I mean, I think there's a legal question here that I guess is in play. But so to me, those two things, like adding green zoning, actually helps us to pass the more restrictive FAR. So I don't see the two things as being in conflict. But it's interesting perspective. And Elizabeth, you're starting to sound like you think that we should drop the green zoning part of it and just drop the FAR.
I just think, I think before you go any further, the question has to be asked. If you have the green zoning FAR and the regular FAR, I'm to Andrew's point, I'm not sure you can just have them both.
Okay, I thought, yeah, we have been talking about this, that we can incentivize stuff that we can't just outright regulate from the beginning, but I guess Andrew has asked it in a different way. So
but if it's incentivizing, and that has to be through a special permit process, then you're never going to get somebody doing
but
that.
We're not doing a special permit. I'm confused about where a special permit came in.
So Andrew's question is, you have the current FAR and everybody is treated the same in their district.
Mhm.
So it deals with size, bulk, and height. And so now you have this FAR that has, green, sustainability, green zoning in it. And you can have a bigger house, size, bulk, and height,
Mhm.
if you're implementing these green zoning
Mhm.
requirements.
Yeah, that's the incentive. Yeah.
So to Andrew's question, I'm not sure you can. I don't know if you can do that, because the sustainability FAR has nothing to do with size, bulk, and height.
Not really rationally related.
They're not related, and so I think that question has to be answered before you can even go further down that path.
Okay,
I'm gonna
what does it have
jump
to do
in.
with a special permit?
So
Let me jump in, guys. Elizabeth, it is
Yep.
10 o'clock. I said at the outset of this conversation, we'd stop it at 10. We've been going for 3 hours tonight. I don't think anything happens in a meeting that's productive after 3 hours. So it would be great to get an answer to that question. We've been stymied in terms of how we can do more things with green and talking about incentivizing it. So if this is a dead end, we want to know, and then we can expand on the mechanism a little further, Kate, in terms of this, whether a special permit is required or not. I'd like to
So,
move off of.
Martin,
Yes.
so just to the special permit side is, a special permit is not a by right thing. So I think you can give somebody an incentive through a special permit.
Oh, you're saying we would have
process.
more latitude if we did make it a special permit?
I think then you can provide incentives because it's not a by right thing, it's a special permit
Ah,
process.
Thank you.
So that's how I think other communities have gotten things passed.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody on the board have any updates that they need to pass along tonight from their liaison meetings? Okay. Elizabeth, any general staff comments that need to?
No.
Okay. Really quickly, I will open it up to general public comments. I ask if points have been previously made. We appreciate them and we got them. If anybody else has a comment that hasn't been raised, please do so. I'll give you a second to weigh in. Okay. Oops. So with that, I think we can adjourn. I think, let's see, no, Nathan, you don't have the next one. I guess I'm back for one more before you've got it. Okay. Kate, I don't mean to just truncate this discussion. I thought it really deserves more discussion, and that's why I wanted to save it for another time. And thank you for sending out the materials. Elizabeth, if you can get us that feedback on that threshold question.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Burton. I
or
just
next
want
one.
to, so this is where I think we are. I think we're kind of on hold, except for the question that Andrew asked in conjunction with the piece about the prohibition of fossil fuels added to it. They're two separate questions. So, so I'm not going to do anything else until that next discussion we have, just so it's clear in
Okay.
mind.
Thank you very much, Kate.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody have anything else, or are we done here? I think we're done. All right, everybody have a great rest of the day.